Hey gun people, we're a little bit chilly here in Texas. I want to talk about jury duty and jury selection. This is a long topic, but a lot of people get picked for jury and they don't know what to expect, or they don't know how to realize or read what's going on behind the scenes. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a being a jury 101, how to get off a jury if you want to get off, how to make sure kind of if you want to be on a jury, what not to do, and then of course if you don't care, then you can go in there without this information and just do what you do and see what happens. I think being informed makes you a little bit better juror because you know how to read the information or interpret what's going on around you when the lawyers and the judges are trying to do their sneaky kind of behind the scenes kind of deal. So, well, you get a jury summons duty and you got to go for jury duty. All right, there's an old saying in the law enforcement and in lawyers and district attorney's office, defense attorney, the only people on a jury are the ones too stupid to get out of it. Now, that may sound negative, but it is what it is. I mean, if you want to get off the jury, you should be able to get out of a jury pretty easy. All you kind of basically got to do is go in there and show a little bit of bias. Cops are never on juries. Matter of fact, on most jury summons duties, if you look at your jury summon, at the bottom it says, if you're a peace officer, if you're a law enforcement officer, check here. Well, the reason why they don't want cops on juries is because we kind of know what happens around the scene and we kind of figure things out. Now, one person will tell you, a defense attorney will tell you, I don't want a cop on a jury because he'll think my client's guilty because he'll believe the cops. But from a prosecution side, they don't want a cop on a jury either because they know how cops cut the rules and they know when investigations kind of are slighted, or they know when the attorney's trying to hide something and there's always more to the scene. So neither side wants cops on a jury. Now prosecution, because they want to be the cop's friend, they're going to say, oh, we wish we could have cops. But they don't. I worked for the DA's office for several years, believe me. They don't want cops on juries because cops can tell when we get good at reading people. We understand when people are hiding something. We know when the lawyers. When you're sitting on a jury, and you can see this on TV sometimes, it's a little exploited, it's not always true, but you can tell when an attorney doesn't want something, they jump up, objection, objection, they try to stop, sidebar, sidebar. A sidebar is where the attorneys kind of get over to the judge and they pss, 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 and the jury can't hear. A thing that people don't understand about jury duty and juries is our system is not about finding the truth. It is absolutely, because a lot of times we know the truth and we can't get it out. If I, as a suspect, raped some kid or raped a woman or robbed a bank, and the cops get a statement from me saying, gets me to admit, yeah, I know I did it, but you know what, I asked you earlier for a lawyer and you know, I didn't want to really tell you I did it, but since you kind of pressured me, I told you. Well, guess what? Even though I admitted it, the jury's never going to hear that information. They're not going to hear it because it's going to be objected to by the defense that it was coerced. I asked for a lawyer, therefore it's not admissible. If the purpose of a trial was to get to the truth, that would be allowed. We wouldn't have evidence that's being suppressed. We wouldn't have statements that were not allowed in. But it's not about getting to the truth. It's about putting on the charade for the lawyers and the courts and to keep people in line, to make people think it's just. If we ever, I mean, right now in the U.S. we're losing a lot of freedoms. Obama's just about the damn worst president. I mean, it's just, the freedom of the country is being chipped away every day, mainly by liberals who want to protect or save or think things ought to be fair in liberal la-la land. So freedoms are going away rapidly, left and right, inch by inch they're taken away. The jury process is if we ever lose the jury process, you can give it up. The government will have all power. I mean, right now our system is so swayed to the government, it's ridiculous. It's supposed to be even, it's supposed to be equal, but it's and when I was a cop, I used to say, man, it's BS. The defense has all all the rules, they get to do it. We can't, man, they're holding us back. They need to hold us back. The defense needs to hold cops back and the government. They need that check and balance. Don't hate the defense attorney for making a mockery of a case or getting a guilty guy off. They have to hold a government check, because once you lose that check and balance of a defense attorney, or once you lose that check and balance of a jury system to where a jury gets to decide, that's the only time that government has to account for people. The only time. Every other time the government is, it's our way or the highway, you don't like it, we'll fine you, we'll lock you up, we'll change the rules, we'll make your life miserable. We got the power, we have the authority, you're the citizens, just give us your tax dollars and shut up. Every other time, that's how the government deals with people. The only time that citizens have power is in that jury seat. And to me, they ever put me on a jury, believe me, I'm holding the government accountable. I don't care how guilty the guy is. I'm holding the government accountable for how they did the investigation. Did they do it right? Was it done fairly? Were they abusing the system? Did they intimidate people? Did they do things that we shouldn't do? Because once you allow them to do it, even if the guy's guilty, then you allow them to do it when the guy isn't guilty. So, I mean, the jury system is really important to hold the prosecution and the government accountable. Now, there's going to be a lot of people, especially somebody that's been a victim of crime and they saw a guilty guy get off, that's going to be mad at the system. Well, you know what? I used to be pro-death penalty. Hell, we rented a limousine one time in California, me and a few other cops, and went to a guy that killed a cop, and we were out there with a champagne when they were going to put him to death, singing, because that was when they used the gas chamber. We were singing plop, plop, fizz, fizz, because this guy killed a cop, and he killed a cop kid, I think, went through a drive. I can't remember the case now, it was many years ago. But I was seriously pro-death penalty. There was all these protesters out there, give peace a chance, let him go, and we were on the other side yelling, hang him! Because we were cops, and it was just, we knew the brutality of the crime, so we were for it. Now that I've gotten older, wiser, and more experienced, and I've seen how the system is manipulated, how the prosecutors and lawyers play, and judges, and there's all these inside backdoor deals, and the system isn't equal or fair, I am absolutely 100% against the death penalty. It's all about politics. I think it ought to go away. I'm all for making a guy pay. You know, if a guy shoots somebody and he gets shot right there, I'm all for it. But for the government to go after a guy afterwards and try to put him to death, absolutely, I don't trust the system. I've seen it manipulated. I had to turn in a DA for trying to hide evidence. They always hide evidence. They always hide information. I don't trust, and again, this is coming from working in a DA's office, and it's not, people are going to go, well, you just worked in a bad one. I've read articles and stories, talked to other cops. It happens everywhere. I've worked with several jurisdictions, and I've seen it happen in several jurisdictions, federal and state. It doesn't matter. When you give power to people, it gets corrupted and misused. So, I'm trying to get you to understand why the jury position is important, but I'm also trying to get you to understand when you're on that jury, you need to be able to look and figure out what's going on. Again, your de facto, when you're picked on a jury, should be able to go in there and say, this guy's not guilty. I'm voting not guilty. I am absolutely voting not guilty until that prosecution of the government proves beyond a reasonable doubt that this guy's guilty. So, what is beyond a reasonable doubt? Lawyers are going to try to get you to think beyond a reasonable doubt is, well, you know, it's just, here's the definition. Here's one definition that I kind of use. Civil crime is preponderance of the evidence. And preponderance of the evidence, basically, I only have to tip the scales. If I go in there and two people I think are telling the truth, and they're both telling the truth, and I don't know which one is telling the truth, and one of them tips the scales a little bit that I believe him more than I believe him, this guy wins. That's in civil trial. That's preponderance of the evidence. Very lower standard than criminal trial. Because in civil trial, you're not talking about taking away somebody's liberty and locking them up. So because of that, you're talking about less, you're just talking about money. It's not as hard to prove left or right. Criminal trials, beyond a reasonable doubt or above a moral certainty. Now, what is that? Well, some people are going to say, if you watch CSI, and lawyers complain about, especially prosecutors, they complain about this all the time, that because of CSI and all these other companies, we can't get a jury to convict because they all think that we should prove it perfectly. Well, you know what? You should be able to prove it. You got fingerprints, you got systems, you got unlimited money, you're spending taxpayer money, you're paying overtime, you got all the cops you need, you got all the investigators you need, you got the FBI, you got all these resources. You ought to be able to prove it. Now, a prosecutor is going to be like, oh, this guy's guilty. It takes more work to really prove it, which is why I would go in as a juror on a de facto, I'm voting not guilty. But I want to talk about how to get out of a jury if you want to get out of a jury, or how to make sure you're in a jury, or to understand why things are happening when you're going through the process. Either you get kicked or you get kept. So you can kind of understand why. So when you get picked for a jury, there's a thing called voir dire. And I may have said it wrong. There'll be some lawyer who's in all Latin. I remember, what is it? Proha vici. I think that means where you practice in another state. If a lawyer's published in one state, but I can proha vici or represent another state. It's something about jurisdiction. But I said it wrong one time to this lawyer, because all lawyers got big egos. Oh, you don't understand law. You didn't go to law school. That's not how you say it. It's said proha vici, whatever. So voir dire, however it's said in Latin, it's basically a questioning to get to the truth, or kind of like people are supposed to be telling the truth so you can ask them questions and get truthful answers. That's kind of what voir dire is. Where voir dire comes in on jury selection is all the potential jurors get brought in a room, and both the defense and the prosecution gets to ask them questions. And then they get to decide if they want to keep them on the jury or kick them off. So when you're going through this process and you're in there, you're going to probably wonder, well, what are they judging me on? How are they judging me? And how they're judging you all. They're judging you on how you walk in, how you're dressed. Do you look like you're interested? Do you look like you're, it's a pain in the ass? If I walk in like this and I sit down, prosecution's probably going to kick me, because the prosecution says, I don't want somebody that don't want to be here because they may hang the jury. Remember, a jury trial is about convincing 12 people. You have to get a unanimous decision for a guilty verdict. A guilty verdict is everybody says the guy's guilty. Prosecution wins. Government wins. If one person says, I'm not convinced, call a hung jury. That's where you'll get to where they call it a mistrial. Most people think a mistrial is something happened inappropriate. A mistrial is the prosecution failed to convince every juror, or the defense was able to convince one juror that he wasn't guilty. So there's a guilty verdict, there's a mistrial to where 1, 11, 7, doesn't matter. It only takes one, but there could have been 11 people that said not guilty and one person voted guilty. Well, on that type of trial, it's still a mistrial, but the prosecution is going to be, we almost had it because they convinced one person, which is BS. And of course, the defense will be like, hey, he couldn't even convince more than one person. So we have guilty, mistrial, and not guilty, where everybody says not guilty. The not guilty thing is so important because it stops the government from coming after you again. When all jurors say not guilty, it's a slam to the prosecution, because it's like, you big dummy, you had all this time, you wasted everybody's time, you wasted the court, and you couldn't convince one person on a jury that you picked? You couldn't convince one person to vote guilty? You're a dummy. So no lawyer wants a not guilty verdict, okay? Now I say no lawyer, but there's cases, and we'll talk about that later, but not guilty stops the government from recharging you. If you have a mistrial and you only convince one person out of 12 that the guy's guilty, the prosecution can refile on this person and charge him again and go through the whole trial again. He cannot do that if everybody votes not guilty. That's why when everybody goes in there, I think you ought to be default not guilty. Because you really should have to be moved on this person that he's really guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, above moral certainty. And to me, that definition is, can I sleep at night? Do I really, if that was my son, daughter, neighbor, friend, mother, father, if that was somebody I knew, could I sleep at night knowing, dude, I know you're guilty of sin? That's my thing. But everyone has their own. Somebody else may be like, you know what? Prosecution and government wouldn't have wasted all his money unless the guy's guilty. He wouldn't be here if he's guilty. I'm voting guilty. So they go in this way, and then as the trial progresses, they may move, man, that doesn't make sense. Man, the prosecution really blew it. What? So, voir dire process is where they ask you questions. Well, how do they pick the questions? Because every trial gets asked different questions. Now, technically, they're not supposed to kick you off a jury. There's two ways to get kicked off a jury. There's a preemptory challenge to where each side gets 3 or 4 to where they don't really have to give a cause. They do have to give a cause if it gets challenged later, but for the jury process, they can just, you know what? I don't like the way this guy walked in. This guy walked in carrying a book about the injustice of the justice system and crooked lawyers. Okay, that's a clue. And the prosecution is going to be like, I probably don't want that guy on my jury. So if you want to get off jury duty, walk in there with a book saying crooked prosecutors suck, the justice system is whack, blah, you're going to get kicked off by the prosecution. The defense will be like, dude, man, I really want him. Too bad. Prosecution is going to boot him right away. So that's one way to get kicked off. Now, another way is when they talk to you or when you answer your questionnaire, they may already have preconceived ideas on who they want. If I'm doing a case on a child that's a victim, I want people who have children on the jury. As a prosecution, I want those people. As a defense, I don't want those people. Why? Because people with children are going to be able to identify that a victim of a child, how the parents feel, and make this crime much more personal, and then they're more likely to convict. So it's all a game about gamesmanship. Now remember, we could have, in the suppression file, we could have proof beyond anything that the guy's guilty as hell, but you may not know that. So it comes back to this games, which is why I don't like the jury, the way the prosecution, the lawyers, and the judges have corrupted the system with this crooked BS. You know what? You need a jury, you get 12 people and you sit down, you got them. You get what you get. Either you convince them or you can't. When our system was developed years ago, you didn't have all this. You couldn't be kicking people off. Well, you know, over time, they probably had some crazy dude that got on jury duty. Nobody wanted to say he's crazy, but they're like, dude, we're not going to be able to convince this guy. We want to get rid of him. Well, you can't. You got 12 jurors. You got to take what you got. So then this law came up with, hey, man, we got to do this. Next thing you know, you can kick off a crazy person. Then from a crazy person, it went to, well, you can kick off 2 people, one crazy and one because he doesn't like you. So you can say, you know, I don't know how the process, but that was just how it turned in and evolved into this big. Now, each lawyer gets to kick off 6, 10, 12, depending on the case. I mean, for like the OJ trial or one of the big trials that we had, shit, they may have got 15 or 20 preempt, they call them preempts. They may have got 10 or 20 preempt challenges. And that way, I can just start kicking people off. Now, there was a legal system, I think it was called Batson, or maybe it was Batson. I thought I made a note. I got Batson or Batsor. I think it's Batson. It's the Batson thing to where what was happening is if I've got a black guy on trial, I want black people on the jury because they can sympathize with his color. So I'm going to kick off all the white people. And if I got a white guy on charge, I'm going to kick off all the black people because they're going to vote guilty because he's blacks. Oh, but there ain't racism. We can't say that. But attorneys used to do that, so there was a rule that came out that says you can't be kicking. You can challenge somebody if they're kicking off all of a certain race. And I would assume, I don't know all the law, you can probably look it up, but I would assume it would go along with you can't kick everybody off that's a Catholic, or you can't kick all Jews off, or you can't kick off all Muslims. So the theory behind that is you can't just kick people off randomly because of a certain thing. You can't kick off all women, you can't kick off all men, you're not supposed to. But there's other ways to get around it. The legal system is never what it is. It's always got in and outs, it's always got exemptions, it's always got back doors, and it's always got crooked attorneys who have had years to figure out how to manipulate words, definitions, and you got presidents like Bill Clinton that wants to define sex, isn't getting ahead. Suddenly it's okay, it's not sex, unless we actually lay down and have sexual intercourse in a missionary style in a room with roses. Then it's sex, otherwise it's not. So and of course Laura Clinton was an attorney who I think got disbarred or whatever, but that's another thing. So just don't ever take the system on what it is. I really think if jurors had a better understanding on kind of what goes on, we would get a lot less guilty decisions from prosecutions doing stupid things. Because it all comes back to the government has the power to make you miserable and it cause you inconvenience to get you to plea. So, you know, a lot of people say if the guy's really guilty and the jury wanted to get rid of it, they would plea it. You know why they don't plea out cases? You know why you get called for jury duty 2 and 3 times? California is 2 or 3 times a year sometimes you get called for jury duty. Because they take everything to trial on the littlest things that they can't convince. They go through all these challenges. They got all these cases going because the government is self-sustaining and it supports itself. The more trials we have, the more money the DA gets. The more the DA can go, I need more money. I've got 20 trials that I have to go to trial. If I only took 3 to trial, how could I justify more attorneys to go to trial? I couldn't. So how do I get that justification? Because that's how the government works. It's all about money and in the military, I remember at the end of the year, oh, we got $200,000 that we got to use up. Everybody give us a wish list. When I was a cop, same way. Our budget gave us so much money, and at the end of the year, if we didn't use it, here, man, go out and spend this. Man, we'd have cops going out buying magazines and holsters and crap that we didn't need, special Garmin GPS for their car. I mean, they were buying all kind of crap because we had to get rid of the money. Because that's how government justifies more money. So our court system is no different. In order to justify more judges, so more lawyers can become judges, we need to justify more courtrooms, bigger courtrooms, more trials. If we have more trials, we need more prisons. If we have more prisons, we need more prison guards. We need more prison guards, we're going to need more unions, we're going to get more money for the... It's all a cycle, and just being inside it and seeing it over the years is so frustrating. However, if you as a juror gets on there and you can understand this, you're going to be able to see the system for what it is. It's got flaws, doesn't work, there's all kind of hidden meanings, things are going to be happening during a trial that you're not going to have a clue on, nobody's going to tell you, and maybe you'll find out after the trial, but maybe that would have changed your opinion. To me, those who have nothing to hide, hide nothing. And the court system is all about secrecy. The judge and the defense attorney get to meet in the judge's chambers. You don't get to hear. They have sidebars. The cops and the attorneys get to meet with the judge. The defense gets to meet with the witnesses before they come on. The defense gets to meet with his witnesses. There's all kind of backdoor deals going on during a trial and a court hearing. So as a juror, you're sitting there fat, dumb, and happy, and then when you vote not guilty, everybody's pissed off because other people are knowing more information. There's a saying that they say if you're guilty, you want a jury trial because you only have to convince one guy or confuse one person or throw up enough smoke to confuse one person to vote not guilty and you get off. And then they say if you know you're guilty or you know you're innocent, you should only have a judge. How you get on a jury is every person who's convicted of crime, for felonies anyway, misdemeanors, it depends on the states, you get the right to a jury trial. Some states, if it's a misdemeanor, they only give you a judge. They won't give you a jury because they just have too many. And I think California is one of those. I don't know if California still, they used to, but it may have to be a violent misdemeanor. It can't. Some misdemeanors you can, some you can't. It's always changing. But in order to justify a jury, you have to be able to, the judge can say, let's say I'm convicted of a crime. I'm arrested for robbery. I get my choice on whether I want a jury trial or I can just have a judge. I can say, you know what, I don't want a jury. I just want the judge to hear it. If you're innocent, they say that's the way to go. Why? Because the judge knows everything. Even if they suppress something, even if they try to hide something, the judge knows everything. He's not going to convict you if you're truly innocent. He's not going to be fooled by all the gamesmanship and the lawyers and this and, and that's exculpatory. Oh, I didn't know it was exculpatory. To me, I didn't think it helped, so I didn't tell you. Well, you hid it. No, I didn't. He don't care about all that. You know, if they suppress a statement that comes in from another guilty guy and they go, oh, well, that was because the cop forced it and it wasn't really true, so we don't want the jury to know that, the judge is going to know it. So if you're innocent and you're truly innocent, the judge knows everything. They say pick a judge. I don't know about that because there's some judges, just like cops and lawyers, you get crusty over time, you get desensitized to the system. I had this clock set for 25 minutes. I'll make a part 2 here if you want to hang around. We'll discuss more of the jury things here. We'll call this part 1, getting out of jury duty or something.